Hello and welcome to the This Week in Cleantech podcast, the weekly show where host David Hunt discusses some of the biggest and most interesting cleantech stories of the week with a guest CEO, influencer or thought leader in the industry. This typically leads on to a more general conversation about their cleantech journey, insights and opinions. This week David is joined by Dan Caesar, a director of the Fully Charged Show, responsible for scaling up the Fully Charged YouTube channel and live events. Dan has long been a passionate advocate for all things cleantech. This is the last episode before Christmas, I'm afraid, so we thank you for your support this year and we hope you have a great holiday period. We will kick off the new year in style in New York, interviewing the CEO of an energy storage startup. But for now, here is David Hunt and Dan Caesar. Enjoy.
Hello, Dan. It's great to welcome you to the This Week in Cleantech podcast, the last before Christmas. It's good that we've managed to get round to it at last. Today, it'd be great if you can share some more of the exciting plans that you, Robert, Johnny, and the Fully Charged crew have planned for next year. But to start with, I know that there are a few news stories that both of us picked out as being of relevance and an interest in the cleantech sector this week. Largely around three themes that jumped out, one of which was consumers get it, one of which was corporates get it, and the other was cities get it. Getting it, of course, is a clear topic, but essentially we're talking about buying into the clean energy and the clean mobility agendas. Now, obviously, you and I can talk for hours around many of those stories, but a few did jump out. First, you picked up on the story that Volkswagen launching a $30,000 or sub-$30,000 all-electric hatchback. Clearly, we know that Volkswagen quite literally is the people's wagon, or built for the masses. Demand, of course, is high. But what was it that jumped out about this story in particular for you, Dan?
Well, it's really interesting, this one. Thanks for having me, by the way. I think VW is a real kind of touchstone for the market because they're so intertwined with the combustion engine that seeing how they were going to attack the electric vehicle conundrum was key. And to this point, they and quite a lot of the established manufacturers have made quite a lot of PR noise, but haven't really sort of followed through particularly. So I think we've all been waiting as Tesla sort of demonstrate they've got something of a competitive advantage, waiting to see what others do. And the challenger brands, interestingly, are the Hyundais and the Kias and the Nissans and the Renaults. And actually, the German manufacturers have been really quite quiet until this year. Obviously, you know, Audi and Mercedes-Benz in particular launched new electric vehicles in the autumn. And VW, in my opinion, are potentially going to be part of this holy trinity with Tesla and with China. VW will be the third part of that, which will really make up the tipping point to electric vehicles will come much sooner. But yeah, we've been invited recently to go and look at the new VW down in South Africa. I didn't get to go on that. That's the glamour job to go to Robert, of course, but he came back very impressed with the car indeed, and he's working currently on an episode to share with the Fully Charged audience on that. But from what I understand, it's a long range sort of golf-sized all electric hatchback. It should be around and available in about a year's time, early 2020, and it's going through hot weather and cold weather testing. And Robert was really impressed with its kind of the spaciousness of the vehicle. The turning circle was amazing, and they're mooting. It's got sort of 550 kilometer WLTP range, so it's kind of in that sweet spot, I think, now of sort of 250 to 300 mile range, which is really making people kind of take notice. So it's really exciting to see them going further than just talking about what they're going to do. This car's real, and now I guess it's up to how quickly they can scale it.
Sure. I think the sub $30,000 thing is important. You and I spoke recently about obviously the Audi e-tron and the Mercedes SUVs. You know, very much being luxury end vehicles. You know, competing in the sort of £60,000-70,000 plus bracket, which is great for early adopters, and they're great cars in their own right. But I should say that sector now, the Golf sector, if you want to call it that, and again, Kia, I've obviously had a couple of episodes with you guys recently, but the price is really, I guess, a significant factor.
It is massive. I mean, I get quite a lot of people say to me, you know, are VW serious? And you hear real doubt in people's voices, not just on VW but other manufacturers as well, to be fair, and you understand that because you can see what's gone on in recent years. The German manufacturers in particular have been sort of mired in controversy about emissions testing and the like. So when I sort of post something online and say, look, I think VW is serious, I think there's something really significant coming down the road, people tend to scoff and say, well, we'll believe it when they see it. And in honesty, the sense I'm getting from the conversations I'm having is that they are very serious, and the price point is one of the main reasons I think that they are. I think it's interesting, isn't it? If you were Elon Musk and you started the Tesla journey with the original Roadster, and then the Model S, obviously what you're trying to do is generate capital to go back into the business, to then make the Model X, to then make the Model 3, and ultimately to make maybe a Model 2 and a Model Y and those sorts of things, and make the cars more affordable. But you have to start as a startup from the beginning, and you have to start with the more expensive cars because you're effectively fundraising. Audi and Mercedes don't necessarily need to do that, in my opinion. So when they launched their EQC and e-tron platforms in the autumn, I was quite surprised to see that they went in at the kind of top end. Now, I'm aware Mercedes and Audi are kind of premium brands, but they didn't have to start there, in my opinion. So it's really heartening to see VW, I think, accepts the fact that they need to go in at the mass market, at the mainstream level, with cars that might be more than sort of £20,000, £25,000 mark. And I think that to me indicates that they are serious, and they're aware of just how existential this moment could be for them if they get it wrong. The other thing I think is that it does look like they're going to try and produce something like 100,000 of these a year right from the word go. And I think they're in the process of converting 3 of their factories in Germany to help them deliver against that. So looking at all the evidence, I would say there are serious moves afoot by VW from 2020 to be, serious players. And, for all the good work that Hyundai, Kia and others have done, they're still finding it difficult to source batteries. So VW, if they enter in the right way at the right cost level in 2020, could stand to gain significantly from the shift to EVs.
Sure. To the battery is something we'll come back to one of the stories later. But again, both that price point and the sort of trilogy you mentioned, clearly the Model 3 has, I say, gone beyond expectations. I think many of us did expect it to do well, but certainly has, again, proved to be a great move by Tesla. The Chinese is something, again, NIO this week, we're looking at obviously bringing more cars to market in China, of course. But how soon do you see some of these Chinese EV manufacturers moving into Europe and into the US?
Well, I think there is clearly, they do have designs on markets beyond the Chinese domestic market, but the growth of the Chinese market will keep them tied up to a degree, I think. Obviously, in that market, they have the loyalty of Chinese citizens who want to maybe buy Chinese brands. It will inevitably be harder, just as it was for Japanese cars in America in years gone by. Although they dominate, it took a long time to get the trust. I actually think some of these new cars that BYD and NIO and others look really quite nice. Actually, look like good cars, and I think they would do well. But I think initially the focus will be largely on China. But there's no doubt about it. China sees that there is a huge export opportunity as well as the domestic market to go after.
Sure. Again, I think all of these brands and Volkswagen and all, there are many drivers, of course, but ultimately they wouldn't be making these cars or commitments if there wasn't a demand. And we know very much that in the EV market in particular at the moment, that demand does outstrip supply. So reverting back to sort of the consumers get it, we really do start to see that, again, there is a genuine demand, and vehicles of this price point clearly are vital to move things along and move them along quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the cars that are currently available, there are around about 10 in the UK that are really kind of pure electric vehicles that are on the market that you can choose from now, and you struggle to get any of them quickly. And some of them in particular have sort of waiting lists of kind of anywhere between sort of 40 weeks to 80. So I think that shows you that there is now demand, and you might say that manufacturers are kind of just trying to manage that demand, but also I think the battery supply has caught some of them a little bit cold. But what I would say is that we recently ran a biggest ever survey of its type on electric vehicles and clean energy via the fully charged channel. And interestingly, one of the questions we asked was, could the shift to electric vehicles make you choose a different brand to those that you've historically preferred? And 87% said yes. So I think that's hugely significant.
That's a big number.
Yeah, it's hugely significant because obviously if you are a Tesla, obviously you're experiencing firsthand a lot of people migrate to your brand. Equally, if you're a challenger brand, you're going to benefit potentially from that as well. But also for the likes of VW, they realise there's a big threat there as well, big disruption coming. So I think consumers do get it. I mean, not everyone you speak to would get it, but I think instinctively people are starting to understand that it is just better technology. And for all the conversations we can have about air pollution and climate change, ultimately better technology usually wins. And in this instance, having driven an EV for 3.5 years, I can put my hand on heart and say they're just better in a number of different ways. So I think that once word gets out, once people start seeing one on their street and then a second one and so on, that the network effect will mean that people will be buying them more and more quickly, and it will be the waiting lists that will be a determinant, because you might find that you go, I quite like a Hyundai Kona or a Kia Niro, and then you find out the wait time is a year, and that might make you look at a different alternative. So I think the battery supply issue is not something to be underestimated.
Sure. And of course, the economics of actually just being far cheaper to run. That I guess touches on the consumers are starting to get this transition. In terms of corporates, for some time now we've seen traditional energy, oil and industrial companies making significant financial investments, from Total and Engie and Scottish Power, and the list goes on. But this week I saw quite a significant story with Hitachi acquiring the power grid business from ABB for $11 billion, and quoting that as being sort of a significant turning point for the energy transition and how we operate and manage the energy grid. Just before I sort of passed that over, it was also quite interesting. I noted that it's almost a week difference between Hitachi announcing they were withdrawing from a £14 billion nuclear project in Anglesey. So I guess you can see their direction of travel. But EVs clearly is sort of central to the fully charged show, but so is the energy transition as a whole. These sorts of acquisitions and plays, where do you see that sort of the corporates and what impact they can have in moving things forward and accelerating the transition?
Well, I think they're absolutely critical. I mean, I think if I was money motivated, I'd be kind of wanting to set up a mergers and acquisitions business in the energy space, because this has started in earnest. I mean, I remember when we first started talking on a regular basis that probably about 3 or 4 years ago, that SAF batteries were bought by Total. Don't you remember that? And ever since then, there's been a steady flow of money from the old energy economy to the new. So you've seen things like BP pick up Chargemaster, Shell pick up New Motion, and there are almost too many to mention. And actually, a lot of these startups.
I was going to throw in Engie acquiring EVBox. It's one of the big global players, both in terms of asset utility, of course, and now in the sort of the charging space.
Yeah, of course. And this is natural, isn't it? They say elephants can't dance. So the big companies struggle to innovate, perhaps, and struggle to turn the oil tanker, pun intended, quickly enough. And clearly, if they're seeing a small startup that's in that space, why wouldn't you want to buy them? So I think we're only the beginning of this, really. I think what's interesting is that sometimes if a big, let's say, oil company buys a renewable energy company, people do tend to get a little bit suspicious about it. And I understand that, but the reality is I think that this shift is broadly unstoppable now. And I think corporations can play a huge role. I think it is tied back to the consumers get it, though, in a way, because I think that there is consumer pressure that comes through to a lot of these companies. That started off with things like corporate social responsibility and making sure you were sort of ticking the right boxes there. But it's more than that now. I think you could see by people moving away from big six energy firms in the UK to ones that provide clean energy, that consumers are kind of instinctively understand that actually sort of going towards clean energy is the right thing. So you could talk about organisations like Hitachi and ABB, of course, but you can also talk about organizations like Microsoft and Google and people like that. I mean, I find that particularly fascinating because the Facebooks of this world and others have set out to do no evil. That's been kind of their mission in life, if you like. And one of the things that they have to do is they have to make sure that they're powering their data centers, which, as you know, is about 3% of global electricity supply. You have to try and power that with renewable energy.
Yeah.
And that's tricky because data centers need to be on all the time. So, these corporations are almost being held to account by consumers, by public sentiment, by sort of greener shareholders, if you like. And I think corporations do get it. I think it makes good business sense for them now. And equally, you can see, the likes of Statoil becoming Equinor, Dong becoming Ørsted, all these kind of transitions happening. So that's not even mergers and acquisitions. Those are big rebrands, effectively. And I think, from memory, Equinor, formerly Statoil, sold a lot of their older stuff off and hived it off to focus on renewables. So corporations are going to be absolutely key. And some of them are going to get stuck with the most incredible amount of assets. And you don't want to be in that situation when the music stops.
No, certainly a lot of strands of assets you just touched on there. I think obviously you're with E.ON separating out the sort of the dirty part of the business into Uniper and the cleaner stuff into energy, and recently Scottish Power announcing they were going to go 100% renewables. So all these are significant. My point was going into touching on this particular story, Hitachi saying that they see the global grid market has been over $100 billion by 2020, and the growth being predominantly through the drive to and transition towards renewable energy and electrification of mobility. So the markets are enormous, but the thing that excites me most, and when you and I both started in renewables, it was almost like a club, and we all hated the big companies because we're all fighting our way. But you kind of got to the point now where they're on our side largely, and that they, because of their scale, their capitalization, and the sort of the abilities and capabilities they have, they can really accelerate this drive now.
Absolutely. I don't think there are too many now that are acting in bad faith. I mean, the reality is that it will always be difficult for a company that's got 99% of its revenue in fossil fuels to want to switch completely reverse towards renewables. And we understand that, but I think it's getting pretty hard for big majors to publicly obscure now and be difficult about that stuff. I noticed with interest in that article, I think it was the lead from Hitachi, so said digital technology is fundamentally changing energy demand and supply. Yeah, and it's interesting, really, because I've felt that way for at least a decade, I think. So it's really interesting, I think, if you've been in the industry a while, to hear a lot of the things you've been saying for many years kind of being repeated by other people like it's brand new information. But the decentralizing and the digitization and the defragmentation of these huge sort of monolithic centralized systems is taking place, and it's underway, and technology is unstoppable in that respect. So it's great to see so much change, but as you all know, in the industry, it's hard to keep up, really hard to keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at the Utility Week, European Utility Week in Vienna recently, and it was, they were gone with the stands with widgets and circuit breakers and sort of components. It was around digital, and you had people like Oracle there, as you said, as digital organizations who are really key to the transition. The second story we picked out, again, and you touched on it so far, about batteries, and we look at Daimler announcing that they were buying and committing to $20 billion of battery cell acquisition to support their EV plans. Again, we're talking billions now rather than millions, and from these companies making the commitments. And Daimler by no means the only one making that sort of significant investment in batteries. You touched on that a couple of times in terms of the transition. How do you see that story and the battery situation generally?
Well, it's really interesting, and it's the sort of thing I end up discussing with people at dinner parties, and I'm sure I won't get invited to many this Christmas on that basis. But I find the whole kind of ubiquity and fungibility of electricity really interesting. I was part of an organisation that was focusing on energy storage 2 or 3 years ago, and obviously we talked about it being the silver bullet and the holy grail. And much like the fact that batteries are pretty inert and not that glamorous to look at, not a lot happened initially, but now it's really starting to happen. And the flow, the discharge away from the older energy model to the new is starting to really take shape. But what's interesting to me is that in the EV market, Tesla very early on understood that they had to be centrally involved with batteries. That had to be part of the business. And obviously, they've got this vertically integrated model where they can obviously offer you the car with its batteries, but also the power wall at the house or the power pack in a commercial industrial sense. They can do the solar shingles on your roof, all those sorts of different things. It's taken a while for the car companies to realize just how significant that is. And I could see from what Daimler are doing that it's obviously a big investment. It looks like it's centered around Asia, Europe, and USA. And it's also across a range of different electrified variants. By 2022, I think 130 different variants, including electric vehicles, but also vans and buses and trucks, and that's very, very welcome. But getting that supply is really, really difficult. And the thing is, at the moment, lithium-ion is king. And that may well change at some point, not for a while, I suspect, but obviously talk about solid-state batteries and others, there's going to be a huge amount invested in lithium-ion. And then obviously one of the things that we get asked about by our consumer audience on fully charged is, okay, is there enough lithium? And the short answer to that is yes. What about cobalt? And the short answer to that is, well, actually, we're reducing the amount of cobalt from lithium-ion batteries, if not reducing it entirely. But what's interesting to me is that people like SK Innovation, who I think are providing the batteries for Daimler, people like LG Chem and others, a lot of them are in Asia. Korea in particular seems to be the kind of the battery center of the world. And so from being a relatively small economy, Korea is going to see a huge demand for its expertise, and it could transform its position on the world stage. But the stuff I'm hearing is fascinating, and it's only secondhand stuff, anecdotal. It's probably not worth throwing into this, but why not? Let's give you a bit of gossip. Certainly what we understand is that some of the battery manufacturers have committed supply to certain car manufacturers, and there's effectively now a bit of a war going on, and occasionally car manufacturers are gazumping other car manufacturers for the best batteries and offering more money for them. So, I think that tells you everything that's about the demand situation. So I think possibly could be the thing that just tampers down the growth of electric vehicles. And by that, I don't mean just cars. I mean all electric vehicles. Could be how quickly the battery market can scale up. But it's just absolutely fascinating to be part of that industry at this time.
Yeah, as you say, to watch it evolving literally on a daily basis. And the next story, I guess, takes that equation one step further, if you like, in terms of batteries clearly aren't just for, firstly, not just for cars. There's a whole world of transport from ships and planes, indeed, that have a requirement for batteries, but clearly stationary storage is a massive issue too. I touched with Lucas Neckerman last week on the importance of cities in the transition. One of the stories that jumped out that I shared across was New York State approving a strategy to install 3 gigawatts of energy storage by 2030. Interesting, citing climate change as one of the key drivers behind that commitment and their investment in that. So clearly there's a huge demand for stationary storage, but cities seem to be doing the business. Obviously across Europe, many are banning diesel and ultimately petrol vehicles, which is another factor driving the mobility transition. But cities seem to be doing a lot when national governments seem to be and ahhing this. We've seen at COP24 recently, and obviously with Trump and all. But cities seem to be doing the business.
Yeah, and I think that it's great, isn't it? It's fantastic. I think we can all agree. Well, I won't let you make you agree in public, David, but the governments and politicians just simply aren't doing anywhere near enough at a national level in the UK, and I think there'll be plenty of other nations that would agree that it's the same in their country. So it's fantastic that there's consumer pressure being applied. Fantastic that corporations are realizing now it's a financial opportunity, and great that cities are prioritizing it as well. We need all these actors to do it. And actually, we did a feature at our live event last year saying, can the energy transition sort of transcend politics? And I genuinely think it can. I think that's what's starting to happen. A regional government or a state in America or a city it doesn't necessarily have to do exactly what is on the kind of the national mandate. And in a city, you're feeling air pollution results directly. So I know Sadiq Khan in London, for example, has been announcing a lot of stuff this week, and it's symptomatic of how much news there is. I haven't been all over that, but most cities around the world, whether they're banning diesel or they're trying to add microgrids or whatever, are aggressively trying to expand in that area. And it's really good to see that even if maybe governments are slow to react by their very nature, that other organisations, individuals, institutions are much more nimble.
Yeah, I think much more nimble, and going back to the original point, much more closer to the consumer. It's the city mayors and the city infrastructure that have the issues to deal with smoggy days and air pollution outside our schools, and likewise in providing and making sure the lights stay on for the citizens. So they're much closer to the consumer and to the sort of the point of use. Government's much further away, but I'm very excited about that. Again, I think you're probably familiar with the C40 program of mayors who globally are attacking climate change or see climate change as an existential threat to their cities and to their citizens, and are making huge inroads in investments such as the one that New York just announced.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with C40 mayors, actually, I have to confess. But, there's so many different things with the RE100 and other groups that are kind of working very, very hard to make this sort of thing happen. I mean, for me, it's absolutely logical that we look at the cities first in a way. There's so much air pollution issues there. And what's interesting is largely vehicles have copped the flak on this particular topic. But obviously there are other major emitters in cities, from boilers to wood burning stoves, fires, the way we incinerate waste, all sorts of different things. So and obviously other types of travel like airplanes and things like that. So it's all of these things, if you're in those markets, those older markets, have to be really aware of the change. And every little reaction, like a city taking it seriously will make someone else think. So it's that kind of that network effect again, which I think is going to have a huge impact. And I'm doing a bit of research in America at the moment. I know you kind of go off to the States soon, and that's really, really interesting to look at America, because obviously every state is so different.
Yeah.
So, California is held out as the kind of the beacon from a low carbon perspective, and they've set some very challenging, ambitious objectives for the next 20 years or so. The reality being they have lots of sunshine, so in some ways they have some solar advantage. And then other parts of the world, one of the ones I'm looking at the moment is Texas, which is really, really fascinating, because if you thought Texas, you'd think big hats and oil, and the reality is that actually, if Texas was a nation, it would be the sixth biggest wind power in the world. So there's some really interesting stuff going on, even where you'd least expect it, which suggests to me that this whole energy transition is actually going to pervade right the way through our life, whether we are red states or blue states, whether we're conservative or liberals. There is no area that it can't permeate. And I think, as you know, I'm a big fan of electrifying almost everything, and I think that we're starting to head down that path, and it's great to see.
Absolutely, yeah, and it is an interesting factor. We've been doing much more work with Hyperion in the States, and we're expanding into those regions. And once you start digging in to see that it's easy from the side of the pond, just to obviously hear the rhetoric from Trump and those that he puts into sort of the EPA, etc. But phenomenal things are happening in California, in Texas, in New York on the East Coast. around individual mayors from small hick towns to major cities that are embracing the transition. Primarily, I think a lot are directly seeing the consequences of climate change, whether that's from California and the wildfires to Miami, which is sinking. That we all know some of the drivers, but it's just nice after 10 years or so to see consumers, to see corporates, and to see cities start to act on and create the transition that some of us were talking about and hopeful of 10, 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, it's the sunny day flooding in Florida and Miami in particular is just extraordinary, and I think there's quite a lot of that in America now. You just can't escape it now. I think the world is starting to wake up a little bit to some of these things. Unfortunately, because the effects are so serious now, and the wildfires are another good point about that. People can't ignore it any longer. And these are the things, sadly, it's going to take to make other people wake up to the fact that we need to do stuff. But the reality is that I saw a great speech about how you should talk about climate change, you should talk about air pollution, you should talk about renewables the other day, and really you should try and make people understand that whatever their drivers are, let's say you're really driven by economy, for example, you're really interested in money, what's going on in the world is going to have a massive detrimental effect on the financial markets. It's going to affect insurance, it's going to affect the stock exchanges, it's going to make the whole market much more volatile. Equally, you could be motivated by the fact that you've got a family. Well, having a family really should make you think, well, what am I going to leave behind for the next generation and for their kids and so on and so forth. So almost invariably with everyone, there's some sort of tie-in. But I think, ironically, I talk about electric vehicles a high percentage of the time, and I think, well, quite a few people are interested in air pollution, will buy an electric vehicle for that reason. Quite a few people are interested in climate change, will buy one for that reason. But the reality is the majority of people don't look at life that way, and they'll just like it because it's better technology. And that's why I always come back to. That's why I'm always optimistic. Well, 364 days out of 365, because I think that these technologies are just better. Like your iPhone or your smartphone is much, much better than the phone we had, 10, 15 years ago. Well, it's not even a phone anymore, let's face it. Exactly. So I think it's amazing to be part of this, but from my perspective, I get a buzz. I know you do of spreading the word and changing opinions and getting people to open up to the possibility that actually this might be good on every level. It's not just about, virtue signaling. It's actually going to be good for your pocket. It's going to be good for the planet, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. I think something Matt Allen at Pivot Power said during one of the earlier podcasts is, you can be the biggest climate denier in the world, but the economics don't lie. And if it works, then it works. I'm going to include in the episode notes a link to the TED Talk, which you flagged up, which was the most important thing you can do to fight climate change is to talk about it, so we can all be equally as welcome at dinner parties as you, Dan.
Well, if it's all getting a bit sticky this Christmas and you start talking about Brexit with your relations, you can just flip into climate change. What could possibly go wrong? Marginally safer topic, yeah.
So maybe that's a good note to move on to plans for, as you say, we're really looking forward to spending some time in the US next year with the team at Hyperion and expanding our work there. But clearly fully charged, amongst many other things, has the US on the horizon. What else does 2019 hold for you, Robert, Johnny, and the rest of the team?
Well, we're at a really exciting point, I think, with Fully Charged. It's a pleasure to work on it. I'm the new boy, and I'm very, very lucky to get to work with Robert and Johnny and people like Mark, who does such a brilliant job producing it. And what Robert's created really is pretty incredible. He's created a global audience, so much so that it's a bit marketing speak, but we think we can confidently lay claim to being the world's #1 clean energy and electric vehicle consumer channel. And with that, we feel there's a huge opportunity to pull people towards electric vehicles, to pull people towards clean energy. And we feel that is perhaps where our efforts are best placed. So I mean, I've been in the energy sector for 16 years, and I kind of fell in love with heat pumps and solar panels well over a decade ago, and have been kind of promoting that sort of thing ever since. And for me, there's nothing better than, I bought solar panels because I came to your renewables roadshow, or we bought an electric vehicle because we watched Fully Charged. For me, that is absolutely the thing that we should be doing, because it just contributes to this network effect. If someone buys an electric vehicle because they have seen the channel, and they go back into their environment, they go back to their house, and their neighbours start asking questions about that, and then they buy one, and so on and so forth. That's how we can really make a big impact. So we're really excited about sort of our plans going forward, and we've spent quite a lot of the autumn really thinking quite hard about the fact that we are kind of poised for quite big growth. We're very much in demand. Well, Robert is, so I can say that, and Johnny in particular. And we want to sort of be ready to grow along with the market. So really, from our perspective, our kind of rationale really is about stop burning stuff. That's our kind of motto, if you like. I'm sure we'll be making some T-shirts on soon enough. But the fact that we're kind of moving past this combustion era, but we want to really take consumers along that journey and help educate them that actually electric vehicles are a really cool tech, and if they've got an electric vehicle, why couldn't they switch energy supply to a clean energy supply, or maybe even go the next step and have solar panels and batteries, maybe get involved in vehicle to grid and stuff like that. So one of the things we did very recently is we did a huge audience survey. I think the biggest audience survey of its type ever conducted. We received more than 7,700 responses telling us about our audience, but also telling us about what they thought about the marketplace, the types of technologies they were interested, all that sort of thing. So that's been hugely informative for us, just to check our plans, if you like. And we really look forward to next year. The channel, and if you know this, David, but typically does about 6 to 8 episodes a month. Yeah. And we do that with a really small, highly dedicated, very talented team. Frankly, there's enough demand for us to easily make 50 to 100 episodes a month. Enough stories. We have to turn down a lot of stuff. Robert is a great presenter. Johnny is obviously our car guy, I guess, so really well liked by the audience, and we're looking to introduce other presenters. So we are bringing on board a BBC presenter from a program called Do You Know, called Maddie Moats. She did an episode on the Powervolt batteries this year. That you can check out on YouTube, and she's going to be more involved in the channel next year as well. And I think we want to add some more accessible content as well, because Robert's inadvertently become a bit of an expert. When he talks about CCS and shadow mode charging, you've got to understand that the large bulk of the population doesn't understand what that is. So I think doing some more kind of entry level episodes as well is part of the plan for 2019. And then we've got a whole range of other stuff going on in terms of growing our audience and doing new things. We're doing a fully charged almanac, which is being crowdfunded via their digital publishing company, Unbound, at the moment. I think you might even be contributing to that, David, if I remember rightly.
A piece for that. Looking forward to seeing that.
So the idea there was we don't want to produce loads of paper products, but we thought, if we could produce a nice, high-quality book, which actually, you could give to someone at Christmas, and you could sort of make them realise that there's actually, it's going to be fun, actually, changing our lifestyles. I use that phrase advisedly. A lot of people are very scared of change, and why should I change my lifestyle, the rest of it? But actually, I found the opposite to be true. I don't think it has been daunting for me. Obviously, maybe when you get your first electric vehicle and you have to charge it, there's some effort involved in understanding how these things work, but it's nothing like as difficult as you think it might be. And actually, the upside of these technologies is normally much, much higher. So that's something we're working on, and that will be something that will be nice, hopefully, nice to hand over, because we just can't squeeze all the innovations, new technologies, and engineering breakthroughs that are occurring around the world into the episodes.
Sure. I think touching on to one of the things there, in terms of the excitement about change. I mean, that was powerful, but at the Fully Charged show at Silverstone this year, when what was it, 6,000 people, but it was the buzz was just so phenomenal, and the desire for information. We obviously were there and had a stand and were chatting to people. Just this huge quest for information and an excitement about that. Now, I appreciate there's, you could say that's early adopters or a niche market, but from what you're saying, that's, the demand is increasing so rapidly amongst lay persons, if you like, and not just those that are active in the sector. And you've got some other shows and events planned also?
We have. So Fully Charged Live is going to come back to Silverstone in June. We're really excited. It's going to be a day longer. It's going to be twice as large, have a lot more theatre content, extended outdoor area with a festival feel. Thousands of test drives, which is something we didn't have the time to do in 2018. A lot of the manufacturers are going to be more heavily involved next summer, so that's great. So really, really excited about that. The buzz in the show was incredible. It was incredible for Robert because obviously you bear in mind that he's built this virtual audience, and all he really sees of them is YouTube comments.
Yeah.
and suddenly to have 6,000 of them sort of flock to a venue and listen with rapt attention to everything you and the other people on stage have got to say is really fascinating. And what it meant was that there was a lot of people in there, maybe came as a couple or came as individuals, but went away thinking, I'm not alone. Because, quite often in the market, you could be forgiven for being the only one at the dinner table, to use that analogy again, who really cares about this topic. But then to be surrounded by thousands of other people who also really kind of care about, reasons behind getting electric vehicles, or even things like plastic pollution and veganism became very popular topics for the show. And so we're looking to expand our content this year. I'm really looking forward to doing, such an energy geek, but topics on things like materials for electric vehicles.
Yep.
Really covering, lithium and cobalt and things like that. So we're going to have we're going to have great fun at Silverstone again next year. We're really looking forward to that. And just because we're not busy enough, we decided to take Fully Charged Live to America as well. So the plan is that towards the latter stages of 2019, we will do Fully Charged Live version 1 in Austin, Texas, at the Circuit of the Americas, which is the Formula One track out there.
Yeah.
And as I say, digging into the American psyche and Texas in particular is really, really interesting, because actually, in some ways, their outlook is 2 or 3 years behind ours. In other ways, they're miles ahead. So it's really, really fascinating, actually, to get under the skin of that. And we're off out there in January to meet a few potential participants for that. So yeah, we've got quite a bit going on. But from our perspective, really, we're just incredibly motivated, very, very lucky to be working on Fully Charged, but incredibly motivated to go out and spread the word. As I said, I get a real buzz when people say to me, "Oh, well, we've got an electric vehicle because of the channel," or we've invested in clean energy, or even the simple things, the cheap things like just switching energy supply. You could do that today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we also like to suggest those things as well. It doesn't have to be a car; it could be a bike, or it doesn't have to be a bike; it could be walking. We're very clear that we're not just about electric vehicles, although that does happen to be a very useful spear tip to have a conversation, because people find cars infinitely more interesting than boilers.
Yeah, I think that's where, as you say, having been involved in the sector, solar panels, a lot of people, my wife included, would still say they're ugly, despite me having fell in love with them many years ago. But yeah, I should say, mostly for positive reasons, but even for negative, cars are quite emotive, and they're a good start point for the conversation. But what I love, hopefully from the content that Hyperion put out, and also more so from the content that Fully Charged puts out, is there's a whole world of things you can engage with, whether you're whatever level of income you have, or whatever lifestyle you have, or whatever geography you're in. There are things that can be done, and there are technologies that can make your life better, but make the planet better at the same time. So I think trying to avoid going off on on an evangelism, but I think that's one of the key factors behind the This Week in Cleantech podcast is really for those who have an interest and a passion in the sector, probably those who work in it, but to share some of our stories. And I really appreciate you sharing some of yours today.
My pleasure.
So yeah, thanks very much, Dan. All those links will be on the episode page, including, of course, links to the Fully Charged channels and YouTube channel in particular. If you haven't already, I'd be surprised if you haven't, but certainly do check that out. And leaves us to say thank you very much for all of your support in 2018. And Dan and I, I'm sure, both look forward to speaking to and with you during the course of the next year.
Thank you again for your support this year. We are available via iTunes, Spotify and Stitcher, as well as most other podcast platforms. We'd very much appreciate any reviews and sharing our podcast with friends and colleagues. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening and have a great Christmas and a great New Year. Goodbye.